Have you ever felt like you gave everything, your time, your youth, your love, only to receive silence in return? There comes a moment when a mother or father looks at their adult child and wonders, where did we lose each other? Not in anger, not in blame, but in quiet heartbreak. If you've ever stared into that silence, hoping for a thank you, a visit, a sign of affection that never came, this message is for you. Carl Jung once said, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parent." But what happens when the parent becomes trapped in the shadow of the child they raised? You were not born to serve a role. You were not brought into this world just to be someone's background character. And yet many parents grow old, imprisoned by guilt, clinging to an illusion of duty that slowly drains their soul. Jung understood that psychological freedom doesn't come from sacrificing ourselves endlessly. It comes from individuation, from becoming whole, even if it means walking away from roles that once defined us. This is not about rebellion, it's about liberation, from emotional dependence, from silent suffering, from the invisible chains forged by unmet expectations. There is a painful truth that few dare to say out loud. Sometimes adult children do not see their parents anymore. They see only what they can take, or worse, what they resent. And when that happens, many parents shrink. They try harder, give more, explain themselves, hoping love will be reciprocated. But Jung would warn, what you resist not only persists, it grows. Chasing love that has turned into power play is not noble. It is self-abandonment, disguised as patience. And it's time to wake up from that illusion. This video is not a condemnation, it is a mirror. A mirror held up by the hand of wisdom, urging you to ask yourself, who am I when I am not needed? Who am I when I am not being praised or blamed? If your identity has become so entangled in your children's choices that you no longer know your own voice, then perhaps it's time to listen not to them, but to your soul. Because the soul speaks, softly at first, then louder, until the pain of silence becomes unbearable. Let this be the moment where you reclaim yourself, not as a parent, not as someone who waits for validation, but as a being whose existence has meaning beyond sacrifice. Jung believed the second half of life is not about achievement, it is about integration, and you cannot integrate what you keep denying: your exhaustion, your resentment, your silent cry for freedom. So if you're watching this, it's not by accident, it's a sign. You're not here just to endure, you're here to awaken. There is a particular kind of silence that only a parent knows, the silence that follows years of sacrifice, only to find themselves alone waiting for a call that never comes. Not because their child is too busy, but because something sacred was lost in the shadows of time. Carl Jung taught that in every relationship, there is a hidden dance of projections, images we cast on others, and those they cast back upon us. Many parents unknowingly raise children not as they are, but as they wish they were. And in doing so, they bury their own essence under the weight of unspoken expectations. You were not born to be consumed by someone else's destiny. And yet, how many mothers, how many fathers lose themselves trying to live vicariously through their children? Jung warned that the unlived life of a parent becomes the unconscious burden of the child. That burden can twist love into obligation and gratitude into resistance. A child may flee, not from you, but from the parts of themselves they were never allowed to become. And the tragedy is that you may not even notice the cage until the key is no longer in your hand. We must begin here, not with blame, but with seeing. The first step toward transformation, Jung believed, is to bring the unconscious into consciousness, to name what was hidden. Maybe you didn't notice how often your peace depended on your child's approval, how your joy shrank or swelled based on how they treated you. That's not love, and that's entanglement. And where there is entanglement, there cannot be freedom, not theirs, not yours. Let us ask the question no one wants to voice out loud. What if your child is never coming back? What if the version of them you long for, the grateful one, the kind one, the one who remembers everything you did, never returns? Jung would say, do not collapse, do not wither, integrate. That pain you feel is the door to your next evolution. It is not the end, it is the invitation to step out of the role and into the soul. Every parent must one day face the abyss, the moment where love given is not love returned, and in that moment you have two choices. You can beg or you can become. You can shrink into resentment or rise into individuation. Individuation, as Jung defined it, is the process of becoming whole. It is when you stop trying to be what others need and start becoming who you were always meant to be. That process often begins with heartbreak. We are told that parenting is eternal, and in some ways it is, but the form must change. You are no longer the one who wakes them, feeds them, shields them from the world. You are the one who must now shield yourself from the illusion that your worth is tied to their affection. Jung would call this a necessary death, the death of the persona you wore for decades, and only through that symbolic death can a more authentic self emerge. So if you are here listening, grieving, wondering what went wrong, know this: nothing went wrong. Something is going right, because you are awakening. And every awakening begins with a rupture, a crack in the image you built, a break in the dream you clung to. Don't run from it. Walk into it, for on the other side of disappointment, there is you, not as a parent, not as a provider, but as a soul, unbound. There is a strange kind of grief that doesn't wear black or show up at funerals. It is the grief of watching someone still alive drift away, not with malice but with indifference, and yet this grief is sacred because it calls you inward. Carl Jung believed that what we fail to face externally returns to us internally as fate. Perhaps the coldness you feel from your adult child is not a punishment, but a mirror reflecting how long you've neglected your own needs, your own becoming, in the name of devotion. And now life, in all its painful wisdom, is handing you back to yourself. You cannot become whole by being everything for someone else. There is a cost to constant giving, and many parents pay it with their identity. They become masters of sacrifice, forgetting that love does not mean disappearance. Jung would caution that when the self is abandoned for too long, it begins to rebel. It shows up in bitterness, in sorrow, in a sense of quiet rage that cannot be named. And if left unacknowledged, it corrodes even the purest memories of parenthood. That is why now, more than ever, you must reclaim yourself, not in defiance, but in sacred necessity. Let us speak plainly. Some children grow into adults who are emotionally unavailable, manipulative, or ungrateful. And while culture may shame you for admitting that, Jung invites a deeper honesty, not to accuse, but to understand. Sometimes the dynamic you have with your child is not just personal, but archetypal. You may be playing out ancient roles: the martyr parent, the rebellious child, the overcompensating caregiver, and until you see the pattern, you will be trapped inside it, endlessly hoping that next time things will be different. There is no salvation in waiting. Waiting for an apology, waiting for them to change, waiting for the love you imagined. Jung would call this psychic paralysis, a form of soul stagnation that keeps you frozen in time. The more you wait for the other to act, the more you deny your own agency. And the deeper you bury the truth. They may never come back the way you need them to. But that doesn't mean your story ends here. It means this is where your story finally begins. Imagine for a moment that your child's absence is not a rejection, but a release. A release from roles you no longer need to perform. A space to rediscover who you were before you were needed. Jung taught that the second half of life is where meaning truly begins, but only for those courageous enough to turn inward, to explore the inner landscape that was ignored while the outer world demanded so much. Your child may not return, but yourself is still here, and it's waiting to be met. We often think healing comes from reconciliation, but sometimes healing comes from letting go of the need for reconciliation. From finding peace not in what others do, but in who we choose to become. This is the shift from outer dependency to inner sovereignty, the very heart of Jung's teachings. And when you make that shift, something remarkable happens. You stop needing to be seen because you have finally seen yourself. So let us not wait another day. Let us not hold our breath for someone else's transformation. You are not here to be tolerated. You are not here to beg for love. You are here to individuate. And that journey begins the moment you stop asking, "Why won't they love me the way I deserve?" and start asking, "Why have I forgotten to love myself this deeply, this fiercely, all along?" There is a reason the soul aches when neglected. It was never meant to be silenced. Jung described the soul as the source of meaning, not comfort, not ease, but meaning. And when we sacrifice that meaning in the name of harmony, we suffer. Many parents unconsciously choose peace at any price, believing that love means saying yes when the heart screams no. But true love, mature love, knows boundaries. It knows when to stop giving in order to start living. Think of your life as a sacred garden. You have watered it for decades, sometimes with your own tears. But if you only water one tree, the tree of your child, what happens to the rest of the garden? It withers. The flowers of your dreams, the vines of your purpose, the roots of your identity, all begin to dry up. Carl Jung would urge you to replant what was forgotten, to reawaken what still longs to bloom, because you are not just a parent, you are a soul with a destiny of your own. There is an illusion that if we just love harder, try harder, we will finally be seen. But this is the ego's trap. Jung understood that the ego clings to control, to outcomes, to the fantasy that we can earn someone's affection by becoming who they want. But the self, the deeper self, has no interest in pleasing. It only longs to be. And the more you betray yourself to hold on to someone, the more you drift from the self's path. It is time to come home. Let us name what is rarely named. Sometimes love becomes manipulation, not because we intend harm, but because we confuse affection with control. You may think that checking in daily, giving without rest, sacrificing endlessly is proof of your love. But what if it's proof of your fear? Fear of being forgotten, fear of being useless, fear of facing the silence. And Jung would say, sit with that fear, not to shame it, but to transcend it. When you begin to live from the self, you will no longer need your children to complete your story. You will bless them for what they were, release them for what they are, and free yourself for what you are becoming. That is the alchemy of Jungian transformation, turning heartbreak into wholeness, letting go not in bitterness, but in reverence. Because even loss has something to teach you if you are willing to listen. The journey you are on is not about fixing a relationship, it's about awakening to a deeper relationship with yourself. The child you once held in your arms is now part of your past, but the child within you, the one you silenced to become a parent, still waits. And that child holds the keys to your next chapter, one not written in guilt or duty, but in truth. Jung would call this the sacred return to the inner child, the source of wonder, purpose, and rebirth. So do not waste another breath begging for love. Breathe instead into the miracle of your own becoming. You are not broken, you are breaking open. And sometimes it takes the silence of others to finally hear your own voice echoing back. A voice that says, I am enough. I have always been enough. And now, I will live like it. There is no deeper wound than being invisible to someone you once held everything for. And yet there is no greater invitation than that invisibility, for it compels you to see yourself. Jung warned that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will rule our lives, and we will call it fate. Perhaps now is the moment to recognize that you were not just hurt. You were handed the mirror of your unlived life, and that pain is sacred because it holds your freedom inside it. The archetype of the good parent is powerful, but it can also be a prison. You were taught to give, to endure, to be strong. But Jung would ask, at what cost? At what point did strength become suppression? When did endurance become emotional self-erasure? Many carry this archetype so deeply that they cannot even name their exhaustion. But it's there, behind the fake smiles, the sleepless nights, the ache that never speaks. And it's time to listen. This is the paradox of individuation. It feels like loss, but it is actually birth. When you begin to shed the masks, the roles, the obligations, the scripted lines, you may feel lost at first. That's natural. You are stepping into a self that was waiting for decades, and like any new birth, it comes with labor, with contractions of the spirit. But beyond the pain there is light, a light not given by others but born from within. You do not need your child to understand this. This is not their work. It is yours. Jung reminds us that each soul has its own path, and sometimes those paths diverge, not because of failure but because of growth. When you stop tying your worth to their presence, you will begin to feel your presence again, and in that presence is power, quiet, rooted, sacred power. There will be moments when grief returns. Let it. Do not resist it. Feel it without judgment. Jung believed that the soul does not grow in the absence of sorrow, but through it. So let each tear be a baptism. Let every sigh be a song. You are not collapsing. You are transforming. What looks like the end is often the beginning, not of a new role, but of a real life. You are no longer here to perform. You are here to live. And the stage you once stood on, hoping your children would applaud, can finally be left behind, because the applause of the soul is louder than anything the world can offer. And once you hear it, you will never beg for applause again. So rise, not in anger, not in vengeance, but in truth. Your journey has not ended. It has just begun, and it will carry you not back to what was, but forward to what can be. A life where you are no longer waiting to be loved, because you have finally chosen to love yourself first. There is a myth so deeply woven into the hearts of parents that it feels like truth, that their children owe them something in return, gratitude, attention, presence. But Carl Jung would gently deconstruct that illusion. He would remind us that love, when truly given, must also be released. It must not become a leash nor a chain. The moment love becomes expectation, it loses its purity. And when it becomes a condition for our happiness, it enslaves not only the other, but ourselves. You may ask, but after everything I gave, how can they be so distant? And that is a question born from the ego, not the self. The ego seeks justice, recognition, fairness. It tallies every effort, every sacrifice, waiting for the moment of return. But the self, the deeper, wiser essence within you, is not concerned with symmetry. It is concerned with truth. And the truth is, what you gave was not a contract. It was an offering. And now the time has come to give that same offering to yourself. The great wound of the caregiver is self-neglect. Decades of putting others first erode the instinct to care for one's own soul. Jung saw this clearly. The mother archetype, when unbalanced, becomes devouring, not just to others but to the self. She feeds until she disappears. But individuation calls for another path, a path where the caregiver also becomes the creator of their own story, their own meaning, their own wholeness. It is not abandonment, it is return. You are not betraying your child by choosing yourself now. You are modeling something they desperately need to see. That identity does not end when the nest is empty, that a human being is not reduced to usefulness, that there is life beyond parenting, and it is sacred. Jung would call this the emergence of the wise elder, the one who stops chasing approval and begins embodying essence. And that essence is forged not in comfort, but in courage. There will still be days of doubt, days when you ache for the sound of their voice, the warmth of their embrace. Let that ache come. But let it pass too. Do not let it define you. You are not a half-life waiting to be completed. You are whole, even in your longing, especially in your longing. Because that longing is not just for them, it is for you, for the parts of yourself you silence to keep the peace. The world will not teach you how to return to yourself. It will praise your sacrifice, applaud your devotion, and leave you empty. But Jung offers a map that leads not outward, but inward, into the shadow, the sorrow, the silence. And only there can the true self be found, not the persona, not the role, but the soul that has always waited beneath it all, whispering, I am still here. So take this moment as sacred, a threshold. You do not have to be angry to walk away. You do not have to hate to let go. You only have to choose truth over illusion. And the truth is this: you matter, not because of what you gave, but because of who you are. That is the foundation. That is the flame. That is the home you return to now. They say that time heals all wounds, but Carl Jung would disagree. Time only conceals what we refuse to face. True healing requires confrontation, not with the other, but with the self, with the wounds we denied, the questions we silenced, the truths we buried under roles and responsibilities. And now in this chapter of your life, those truths are resurfacing, not to hurt you, but to liberate you. Have you noticed how tired you are? Not just in your body, but in your spirit? That is not aging. That is accumulation. Accumulation of years lived for others, of needs postponed, of boundaries crossed in the name of love. Jung believed that when we suppress the authentic self, it doesn't disappear. It waits, and eventually it demands to be heard. That voice within you, the one that whispers enough, is not weakness. It is awakening. There is a sacred defiance in reclaiming your own life, not the life others expected of you, not the one shaped by sacrifice, but the one that still flickers beneath the ashes. Jung called this the transcendent function, the capacity of the psyche to hold opposites and birth something new. You can be both a loving parent and a free individual. You can grieve what was and still choose what will be. You do not have to choose between love and liberty. You only have to choose consciousness. Let's tell the truth. Your child may never say thank you. They may never return the kindness. They may remain distant, lost in their own journey. And that's okay, because this is not their journey, it's yours. You are not a secondary character in their story. You are the author of your own. And when you realize that, something in you shifts. You stop waiting to be chosen. You choose yourself, fiercely, completely, without apology. This is where the soul begins to speak in a new language. Not one of blame, but of boundaries. Not of guilt, but of grace. You begin to say no without shame. You begin to say yes to what nourishes you. You begin to build a life that doesn't revolve around someone else's orbit. And in doing so, you step into your full humanity, not the parent, not the servant, but the sacred self. There is no manual for this phase of life, no checklist for reclaiming the parts of you that were forgotten, but Jung offers a lantern, the light of inner work, of honest reflection, of spiritual courage. And when you follow that light, you find that you are not empty after all. You are available to joy, to purpose, to a peace that is not dependent on who stays or who leaves, but on how deeply you are rooted in your own soul. So take the hand of your own becoming. Speak gently to the parts of you that are still afraid. Let them know we are not going back. We are moving forward, not away from love, but toward a deeper love. A love that does not beg, a love that does not shrink, a love that begins where illusion ends. There is an image you may have clung to for too long, the image of the perfect family, the grateful child, the harmonious home. And that image, though beautiful, may have become a prison. Carl Jung taught that symbols and archetypes are powerful, but when they ossify, they become idols, and idols demand sacrifice. Perhaps now is the time to let that image break, not in despair, but in relief. What if the life you were meant to live begins after the image breaks? What if everything you thought was loss is actually space to build something real? There is no shame in starting over. Jung would call it necessary, because the self does not bloom in fantasy. It blooms in soil, real, dark, honest soil. The kind made from tears, from letting go, from finally telling the truth. You don't need to justify your pain. You don't need to convince anyone that you were a good parent. You were. But that story is written. And now, another story begins. One in which you are no longer reacting, no longer waiting. One in which you create. You create ritual, solitude, connection, joy. You create a world that reflects you, not just your role, but your essence. There is power in solitude. Not loneliness, but solitude, the sacred space where your voice returns to you. Jung believed solitude was essential for individuation. It is in solitude that the masks fall, that the silence becomes music, that the soul speaks clearly. If you are alone now, do not see it as punishment, see it as preparation. Something in you is being shaped, not for their return, but for your rising. And yes, the pain may still visit. Let it. Sit with it. Listen to it. But do not let it stay longer than it needs to. Pain, like a storm, clears the air. It reminds us of our humanness, but it is not meant to define us. You are not your heartbreak. You are not your regrets. You are the one who lived, who loved, who gave everything, and who now chooses to live again. This choice is radical. It is revolutionary. It says, I will no longer measure my worth by another's eyes. It says, I will no longer live in the shadows of someone else's silence. It says, I am here, I am whole, and I am enough. And when you say that, not just with words but with being, the world begins to rearrange itself around your truth. So breathe. Inhale what is. Exhale what was. This is your life, raw, real, radiant. And it deserves to be lived not in fragments but in fullness. You are not the past. You are not the wound. You are the one who survived it all and chose to rise. There is a moment in every great journey when the traveler looks back, not with longing but with understanding. You may still feel the echo of your child's absence, the ache of memories that never fully bloomed. But Carl Jung would urge you not to turn back. He would say, your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. And that is where you are now, in the heart of your own becoming. You have shed illusions. You have faced shadows. You have walked through the fire of unmet expectations, and now from the ashes something new rises, not a better version of the parent, but a truer version of the person, the one who is no longer defined by how needed they are, the one who is no longer starving for scraps of love, the one who finally is free. Freedom, in Jung's eyes, is not the absence of attachment. It is the presence of self. It is the ability to hold sorrow and joy in the same breath. To bless what was, release what is no more, and step fully into what is. You are not empty, you are available to new meaning, to sacred friendships, to late-blooming dreams that still burn quietly inside you. There will be voices, external and internal, telling you to hold on, to wait, to keep sacrificing. Let them pass, smile at them, and return to your truth. Because you have learned that clinging is not love, that control is not care. And that freedom, though painful at first, is the birthplace of peace. Jung's greatest gift to us was not answers, but a path into the depths, into the mystery, into the soul's longings. And now, you walk that path, not behind anyone, not for anyone, but with the quiet dignity of someone who has remembered who they are. And that remembering is your return. So let this be the moment you say yes, to solitude, to strength, to self. You are not what was taken from you. You are what you choose to reclaim, and no child, no silence, no past can take that away again. There are silences that echo louder than any scream, and perhaps now, at the end of this journey, you've heard one of them inside your own soul. Carl Jung never promised that awakening would be painless. He only reminded us that pain is often the very fire through which the soul is refined, and what you've just lived, whether years or decades of waiting, pleasing, hoping, was not in vain. It was the soil, and from that soil something deeper is now blooming, your essence, not as a role performed but as a presence incarnated. You have walked through the terrain of heartbreak, but you have not been broken. You have stood in the face of emotional neglect, but you are not invisible. You have dared to confront the illusion that your worth was tied to someone else's love, and you have emerged, not with vengeance, but with vision. A vision not borrowed from culture or expectation, but born from the deep well of your own unconscious, finally brought to light. As Jung taught, who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. And that awakening is happening now. Let that truth take root. You are not a failed parent because your child became distant. You are not incomplete because someone no longer chooses to see you. You are a soul that was called, tested, and now reborn in truth. The path ahead may not be filled with applause or validation, but it will be rich with meaning, the kind of meaning that only comes when you stop needing to be needed and start learning to be. Fully, freely, fiercely. Look at yourself now, not through the eyes of a child, not through the lens of old roles, but through the sacred gaze of someone who remembers who they truly are. Beneath the duties, beneath the decades, beneath the silence, there was always you. And now, as the echoes fade, your own voice begins to rise, softer, stronger, more certain, not begging to be heard far, but finally, deeply, listening to itself. So ask yourself, Before this video ends, what if your greatest chapter begins the moment you stop waiting to be chosen? What if everything you were searching for in someone else was quietly waiting in the mirror? Jung would not give you a map. He would hand you a lantern, and the path is yours to walk. No longer as a parent seeking validation, but as a soul choosing liberation. The door has always been open. You were just too loyal to your cage. If this truth touched something inside you, if it cracked a shell, illuminated a shadow, or made you feel less alone, then don't keep it to yourself. Share this message. Let others know they are not the only ones walking through this valley. Comment below with your story, your pain, your rising, and subscribe to this channel, not just to receive content, but to become part of a community that dares to speak what others only whisper. Because the more we awaken, the less we pretend. And in that honesty, we finally begin to heal.